I am the co-chair of the English department at Bellevue High School. I'm so happy all of you are here. This makes my whole night. It's 8 o'clock on a Wednesday. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Let's see. I teach senior English, otherwise known as college in the high school. I have 5 sections of it this year, but for the past 8 years, I've taught juniors, and I've done the college essay every year with my juniors. So I have years of experience now with teaching the college essay. So I hope to share some of it with you. So give me just a second. I'll share my screen with you and my PowerPoint here. Look at me remembering how to do this from my COVID days. Oh, may those never happen again. All right. Here we go. So I always think it's important for my students to know a little bit about me as a human being instead of just a talking head. So here's a little bit about me and what's important to me, clearly, my family and my beautiful son, Callan. So this is my 10th year of teaching. And I have a BA in creative writing from Seattle University. And then I also have a master's in teaching from Seattle University. I come from a long line of teachers. It's in my, I would say it's in my blood now, my genetics. I think I was meant to be a teacher. I've had some essays and poetry published in both print and online magazines. I've also done some collaborations with a friend who's an artist. And so I always say that just because I want to model for my students that what I'm teaching in the classroom, I actually practice in my personal life. So I can also share like how hard that process is. Like I said, I have an almost 3-year-old. I had a son at the very, very beginning of the pandemic on March 4th of 2020. So he'll be 3 next month. And then we have 2 rescue dogs. They're Staffy mixes. So that's a little bit about me, just so I'm a human being to you. Cool. So I would love some participation if you are feeling brave. I've done this presentation in person too. So I've done it online and in person. And in person, yes, I tend to get more engagement. But I would still love if I had some students in this space who would choose one of these questions and just pop your answer in the chat. Just because it's interesting for me to kind of know where my audience is at. So you could answer, is college important to you? Why or why not? And I know if your parents are sitting right next to you, you're like, oh, Ms. Townsend, don't ask me that. Of course it's important to me. But you can be honest here, right? You can be honest. It's just me. We're just going to pretend we're the only people here. If college is important to you, maybe what's motivating you to go to college? So I will just share my motivation. My very long educational journey summed up really quickly. I was a terrible high school student. Like, I can't even believe I graduated. I was so bad. And then I finally got my act together in my mid-20s and said, oh, I got to do something with my life. So I went back to Seattle Central Community College, did all my kind of prerequisites, and then transferred to Seattle University. And what motivated me to do that was definitely to end the cycle of poverty that I grew up in, the generational poverty. I came from a single mom, and we lived on food stamps and government housing, and I did not want that for myself or my family. So I got myself to college. So that's my motivation. If I'm going to ask you to share, I feel like it's important for me to share too. Maybe some of you have some plans once you graduate college. I don't know. I have a few students who know exactly what they want to do, and I'm so envious of those students. But if you have a few brave souls in here, I'd love for you to just answer one of these questions and put it in the chat. Let's see. And if you're sitting in for your kid, that is totally okay. You are welcome, obviously. I know I have plenty of parents in this space, but I always like to ask students. And when I do this in person, and I ask these questions, it's so cute. The kids kind of look like, oh. Yeah, one of my questions was, why is college important to you? If so, why? Because if you ask students, sometimes they don't have an answer as to why it's important to them. So I always kind of follow that up with, is college important to you? Why? Why or why not? So I'll leave these up here for just a second. Okay. Because it's a learning opportunity. Yes. Oh, that makes my heart so happy. That if I always tell my students that if I could be a professional student and get paid just to go to school, that's what I would do. And I actually had in my previous 2 sessions, I had plenty of students say, because I want to learn new stuff. And that makes my heart so happy. So I also, having high paying careers or important careers was also really important for students. And I think that's radical honesty right there, right? Because I need a good job. I want to get a good job. But I also think that just the learning aspect is really important. All right, I'm going to go ahead and move on. But again, if you're still kind of formulating your answer to some of those questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. I'm happy to revisit. Okay. So 2 questions I get every year. Do they really read everyone's essay? Are they really going to read my essay? And does it really matter the quality of it? And I always tell them, yes and yes, absolutely. Otherwise, they would not require this. So it's not just the what you say, it's how you say it. I can't tell you how many times my mom said that to me as a teenager. It's your tone, but tone matters, right? So we'll get to that in a minute. But I wanted us to think about when reading your essay. So kind of think about this from a college admissions person or university admissions person, their perspective. These are some things that they are thinking about as they're looking at your applications and reading your essay. So they're thinking this, do we really want to spend 4 years with this student? Because you have to think it's of course, for the 4 years you're going to be there for your undergraduate, but maybe, like me, I went to Seattle University for my undergraduate and my graduate degree. So they're thinking kind of long term, do we want to enter into a relationship with this student? Because once you graduate from that college or university, you're then an alumni, right? So you might decide to kind of give back to your college or university. You're going to be hopefully an important and integral part of that space. And so they're thinking, do we really want to spend 4 years with this person? And how is this person going to make our college or university, our campus, a better and more interesting place? How are they going to impact our school in a positive way? They also might be thinking, does the student really fit our school's mission and philosophy? So, as I said, I went to Seattle University and I chose that university. Well, my mom went there. That was one reason. But a big reason was my values aligned with their mission, which is to teach the whole person. So I was really, of course, I'm a lifelong learner. I was very interested to know that beyond my creative writing classes, I was required to take some ethics courses and some theology courses and some philosophy courses, some history courses. Those are things I wouldn't normally have taken had they not been required. And I'm so happy that I took them because I learned a tremendous amount. And again, they're thinking about does the student's values align with ours? I will make this PowerPoint. I'm going to put my email in the chat at the end of this presentation. So I'm happy to email this presentation to you directly, but it should also be available on the district website. I say that because I recognize some of this print is a little small. So, but things for you as a student to consider, and this is definitely for your college application, or excuse me, for your college essay, but also just for your application in general. So a few things to consider. Admissions does not entirely rest on your essay. So I was a terrible high school student. I don't know how I graduated high school. I'm very honest with my students about that. I feel like for some, it makes me more relatable. I just didn't see the value, honestly. That was my mistake. I had to learn the hard way. I own that, of course, but I was a pretty decent writer. I started writing at a really young age. It was just my place, my thing that I love to do. And I could write a great college essay, but my grades and my lack of extracurriculars or lack of any interest in anything brought me down, and I actually couldn't get admitted to any colleges because of that. And, you know, again, you could have the vice versa happen, right? Where your essay is like, meh, it's okay, but your test scores and everything else are really great. It still kind of calls in, it's not going to be a red flag, but it's definitely going to call into question your application and you as a student. So they're really looking at the whole package, right? They're looking at your grades and your transcript. They're also looking at your extracurriculars, that's like volunteer stuff, sports, instruments, clubs, just all the things you are doing outside of school. And then of course they're reading your essay. So they're looking at all of it. This is a really important thing, and especially I think important now. In the past, I've had students have, I don't know how to say this, but I've had tutors write students' essays. It's very obvious to me when a tutor has written, or someone else other than the student has written their essay. Now we are dealing with Chat GPT, yay, writing all kinds of interesting things. I cannot stress this enough. Write your own essay. Like, definitely write your own essay. And I say that for a myriad reasons, but I think for me, the biggest thing is this is your place to share something about you that is not reflected in the rest of your application. This is your story to tell, and take pride in that. I really can't stress that enough. Take pride in yourself and your accomplishments and who you are, and show that in your essay. Don't let, you know, some other person write it for you, or some AI bot thing write it for you, please. The essay is the portion of the college app that you have the most control over. So this is pre-COVID. So I've had students, one year I had several students, unfortunately, get all kinds of different illnesses or injuries, or things happened where they had to be out of school for an extended period of time. Or maybe they had to take care of, I had a couple, like a student or two, have to take care of family members. So they, you know, maybe they had to go to work to pay for the rent or whatever, like things happen. And this could be reflected in your grades, right? Like, oh my gosh, maybe in 9th or 10th grade, this thing happened. It was really out of my control. Your college essay is the place that you have the most control. So you can actually take the opportunity to explain that, right? So for me, when I finally decided to go back to college, I used the college essay to get into Seattle University. I used that as an opportunity to explain my poor choices in high school, and then my early 20s. So, and my radical honesty paired with my improved grades, paired with my ability to write, got me in. So that was the portion I had the most control over. I cannot stress this enough. Edit, revise, edit your work. You will become a better writer, not just creatively, but also academically. Also just in your own life, like writing emails, writing notes, writing small assignments at school, writing larger papers. The more you read, the more you write, the better you'll be at both. So I cannot stress that enough. Once you have your essay, you definitely want to take time to edit it and revise it and edit it more. And we'll talk about that in a little bit in more detail. All right, strategies for how to write an engaging and original college essay. Again, original. Just keep it original. So showing versus telling. This is something that students get taught in very early, like elementary school. And they kind of build that skill in middle school. And then I feel like high school just kills that creative writing for students, which really bums me out, especially as a creative writer. So I think that my colleagues and I do a great job of preparing our students for academic writing and that critical thinking that needs to go with it. But we have a deficit in creative writing, or kind of, yeah. So when my students get to 11th grade and they have to write this college essay, and I say, well, you need to show me this. So like, I don't remember how, because they're so used to doing this academic writing. And so the showing versus telling, you want to really immerse your reader in the story you're telling. And you need to have a balance, of course, like you need to have some telling details to kind of move your narrative along. If it's all showing, you're going to lose your audience, but you do need to have a balance. So something like I was tired and couldn't move, I can make an argument for that just being fine, right? If I'm tired and couldn't move, the sentence itself sort of mimics how I feel, right? I was tired. You could even just leave it at that. I was tired. 3 words. I'm too tired to say any more words. I'm just going to use 3. I could make an argument for that for sure. But if I want to show, I'm going to say the lids of my eyes hung heavy like wet bags of sand. And what you're showing there is not only that you're kind of immersing your reader in how you're feeling, but also you're showing that you know a few tricks, some writing tricks. So hung heavy. There's alliteration there, that sound. And then like wet bags of sand, you've got a simile in there. So you're showing you a little more nuance in your writing. Like, you know what's up, you know how to show. And that's going to elevate your writing just a little bit. Please avoid cliches. If I read salty tears ran down my face one more time, I always tell my students, like, just don't, please don't. So don't write time stopped or my journey began, like the word journey, blah. Just say what you want to say and say it in your way, in your unique voice. It's really, that's a tall order to say something that hasn't been said before. I trust me, I don't even know if I could do that all the time, but make sure that whatever it is you want to say is in your own voice. And if you don't know, if you're like, is this a cliche? Is it not? I don't know. Ask your teacher, ask your parents, ask your guardians, ask your friends, ask your siblings. Does this sound too cliche? Does this sound okay? And hopefully the people that you're asking will give you honest feedback. Avoid second person. Yes.
Jennifer, sorry, there was a question that was kind of relevant.
Oh,
there.
Yeah, sure.
Is figurative language a good idea?
Yes. I mean, I'd have to see the actual example, but yes. Yeah, it can be. Yes. Yeah. And I'm happy to provide specific student examples. If you email me, which I'll share my email, I'm happy to send some of those out so you can kind of see what I'm talking about too, because I always think that's a really great learning opportunity. And your teacher should have examples, because in 11th grade, at least in my building at Bellevue High School, but I think this is a district-wide thing. It's actually an assignment where students have to write their college essay. So it does go through your teacher. They should have examples from their students too. So I hope that answered it. Avoid second person at all costs. Unless you're writing an instruction manual or an email, you shouldn't be using you. In fact, I was grading formal essays today and one of my students used you, and I was like, you're a senior, you should know better than that. But just if it's about, you're writing a personal statement about yourself, use I. Because we're so trained in academic writing, students get afraid to say I. They're like, what, I can use I? Yes, go for it. You can also try different transitions. I think this just adds a little bit of, it kind of differentiates instead of just going next, lastly. Oh, I don't like when students write that, lastly. But you could say something like, however, right? Or later, right? Therefore, you don't want to write, then this happened, then that happened, then I did this, right? You want to kind of differentiate just a little bit. Play around with your syntax. So these are all just style choices. And when you add them all up, right? So if you're playing around with your diction or your word choice, if you're playing around with your syntax or your sentence length, of course, utilizing figurative language, if you're playing around with all these different tricks, you're going to develop a really interesting essay that the college admissions person wants to read, because that's really the whole point, is getting someone to want to read it, right? You want to engage them, you want to hook them, and you want to keep them in your story for the length of the story, which is 650 words for Common App and Coalition. It is okay to use a thesaurus. I tell my students, of course, use your tools. That is a tool. However, don't choose words you don't know or words that sound really weird or forced. And sometimes the most simple words are the best. And you can use them in different ways, right? So I gave you an example. My mother barked orders at me, or the window wept with raindrops. I mean, to me, those sound a little bit cliche, but it shows the point. These are just basic words, but they're used in a little bit of an unexpected way. So again, don't be afraid to use a thesaurus, just be very cautious of it. If you, my kind of rule of thumb for students is if you wouldn't use it in your everyday speech or in your writing, most likely you want to avoid it. Not always, but most of the time. This is not a place to tell your whole life story. I cannot stress that enough. You have 650 words. That is not a lot. All of the words matter. All of the little articles like a and the, they all matter. They all go to that word count. Every single word matters. I cannot stress this enough. Out of all of the essays that I assign, this is the hardest one for students. It always has been. And until they maybe stop requiring this, this probably always will be the hardest one because it's about you. And a lot of students have a hard time writing about themselves. I find it ironic that people feel okay to share pictures of themselves and all kinds of really big, intimate things online. But when you ask them to write a story about themselves, they clam up, I don't know how to do that, because it's a really scary, intimidating process and thing to do. But I guarantee once you've shared like a little portion of something about yourself in a way that that sort of makes you comfortable, you become really proud of yourself. Like it's really cool to watch that transition. But yeah, don't tell your whole life story. I'll give you a really good example because I used it in my first and second session. So why not use it for my third? I had a student a couple of years ago, actually. She was brainstorming ideas for her college essay and she was kind of struggling. And one day she came to me and she said, Miss Townsend, I have an idea, but I don't know if it's good. And I said, okay, tell me about it. And she says, I want to write about the BTS meal at McDonald's. And I said, what? What is that? And I said, you mean the K-pop band? She goes, yeah, you know them? And I'm like, well, yeah. She said, I want to write about that. I said, what do you mean you want to write about that? Tell me, I'm already interested. So already she had me hooked. Like, you want to write about a McDonald's meal? What? So she starts telling me about this idea that she had. And she said that her mom and her dad moved from Korea to here, to America. And that my student was born here. And so she said, you know, when I was growing up, my mom has always been a big fan of K-pop. And as I was growing up, I was kind of embarrassed by it because not everyone knew they didn't know what K-pop was. But then as she got older and got into high school and more people, you know, of course, it became this like big, huge thing where everyone was listening to, is really popular. This thing that she was always embarrassed about, right, about her mom and about really her culture, she started to embrace. She started to really kind of go, okay, yeah. And she started to really like K-pop and just like really embrace this part of her mom that, you know, anyway, so her mom one day was like, hey, we have to go to McDonald's and get this meal. And that's not like a thing they wouldn't normally eat that. And so my student's like, oh, really? Okay. So they go, and my student said it ended up being the best meal she's ever had with her mom. And it wasn't because it was McDonald's, it was because of what it represented or what it symbolized. And when she told me this, I was like, oh God, it's so beautiful. She said, you know, I think what was really cool is not only was I able to spend some time with my mom, they're really close, but also the McDonald's meal itself sort of symbolized her Korean culture, her Koreanness, her Korean side, and her Americanness, and those things coming together. And I thought that was just the most beautiful, kind of unique, interesting essay. The student is now in college, and I actually saw her last year. She's doing very well. But that right there was not her whole life story. It was a little moment in time, but it said so much about who she was, right? It said she was creative, that she thought outside the box, that she loved her family. It said something about her culture without really making, the essay wasn't so focused on her culture. It was kind of embedded in part of it. I just thought it was really beautiful. So that's like one idea of many that my students have come up with, and that I push them to really think about, like zoom in on one particular thing. Tell your story, not someone else's. So, excuse me, I realize we have about 6 minutes left, so I'm going to try and rush a little. This is a hard one because a lot of students want to write about a couple things. They want to write about the time they moved in 8th grade, and I tell them no. They want to write about their parents' divorce. I mean, I know I'm saying that sort of casually. I don't mean to say that casually, but that impacts students, of course. And if it does impact them in a really significant way, I'm like, let's explore that. But more often than not, it's their parents' story, not theirs. And so instead of saying, no, you can't write about whatever it is the student wants to write about, I say, well, let's talk about it. Why do you want to write about your parents' divorce? Why do you want to write about moving? Why do you want to write about, your brother's struggle with addiction or something like that? And normally what comes out of that conversation is, well, I just didn't have anything else to write about. And so then we talk and really narrow it down. And sometimes we come out with a K-pop McDonald's meal. And kind of segueing into this, if you're going to tell a story that's maybe a little traumatic or a little sad or maybe a little dark or whatever, you have to make sure that you're showing your audience or your reader how you took control of the situation and how you rose above it. I know that's a cliche, but you can't just sort of have yourself be the martyr of the story. The college essay is not a resume. They have your resume. So make sure it's not a list of accomplishments. So a few tips on getting started. If I have any ninth graders in this space, I hope I do not, but if I do, you're a little early to the party. Even if you're in 10th grade, I think you're a little early to the party. I think it's great that you're thinking about it. But really, I think 11th grade is the appropriate time to really start looking at the common apps and the coalition apps. The prompts, really starting to think about what do I really want to write about. And then the summer going into 12th grade, the beginning of the summer going into 12th grade, like throughout that summer, that's when I tell students really zero in, start drafting, start really knowing what you're going to write about. And then have a good solid draft or two, right? Maybe they're different topics to show to your teachers. Like maybe you can get help during tutorial. That's usually when I help my students. September and October are really busy months for English teachers, especially of those of seniors, because they're really helping with those college essays. So rely on the vast amount of support you have in the district. A couple things, I cannot stress this enough. Read, read, read. I don't care what it is you read, but students need to be reading. And not just things for class, but I'm talking about reading the news online. I'm talking about reading fiction, nonfiction, comic books, manga, the cereal box. I don't really care. I just want students reading, because the more you read, the better writer you're going to be. The more you write, the better reader you're going to be. It goes hand in hand. Keep a journal. I let my students journal every block day. I think it's so important, especially as teenagers, to get all that stuff you're carrying around, get it out on paper, like legit, actual, real paper. If you don't have paper with you, you don't have your journal with you, I keep my notes app open with writing ideas or things that I'm kind of thinking about, because you never know when inspiration or ideas are going to come to you. So always make sure that you've got a pen with you, paper, or at least your notes app or something where you can jot them down. These are the Common App prompts. You can look these up. You can just Google Common App prompts 2023. They change slightly some years. Coalition App, same thing. Most colleges and universities that I've come across with my students, it's Common App. And then this is a brainstorming exercise. We only have 2 minutes left, so I'm not going to go into every detail here, but excuse me, I cannot stress enough. Don't just say, I'm going to write about this one thing, and then that's all you focus on. You really want to kind of mine ideas and brainstorm a lot until you feel like you've got a couple, and then you can really start drafting and having people read your work. I like what Stephen King says. He says, write with the door closed and edit with the door open. So get all of your ideas out on paper, say what you want to say, however you want to say it, and then open the door and let people in. You also have to remember to leave your ego at the door. So my students know, like, I'm going to be brutally honest with them. If it's not a good essay, it's not good. I'm going to tell them why. I'm not just going to say it's not good. If it's a beautiful essay, usually I cry. And then I'm like, oh, I'm so proud of you. But that's the kind of reaction you want from people. You want to kind of elicit some response, right? Hopefully it's a good one. And then lastly, I don't like that these are called rules, but I still like them. I think the biggest thing here is the last one, go for the jugular. Again, I tell my students, there's nothing really off limits. Some people will disagree with me and say, well, certain things they shouldn't write, it's too personal. But here's the deal. If you are okay sharing whatever it is you're going to share, if you're okay sharing with your parents or your guardians, if you're okay sharing with your teacher and your peers, you're okay sharing it in front of a college admissions person, then why not? Right? Whatever it is you want to write about, whatever you feel is like going to represent you, then write it, because that's where your best writing is going to come from. Okay. So I think we have 1 minute left, but I'm happy to stay a little bit if for like a couple minutes if you need to, but I am done. And like I said, I'm going to share my email in the chat if you want to follow up and ask me for the PowerPoint. I have some handouts for structure and brainstorming stuff, and I'm also happy to send out some student examples of college essays. But I think the district should have these things on their website too. So thank you so much. And again, if you have some questions really quickly, I'm happy to answer them. You can just put them in the chat. And then there's my email too. Yeah, you're very welcome. Let's see. Delwyn Elder. If I'm thinking about taking a gap year, is it okay to mention that in the essay? You know, I think it depends, honestly. If you do something really cool during that year, I wouldn't see why you wouldn't write about it, because they'd want to know, like, you graduated this year, but then you're applying now. What happened in between? I think that would be totally appropriate. In my essay, I graduated in 2000 and I didn't actually go to, I didn't go back to college till I was like 24, 25. I had to explain that. Like, what was I doing? Why didn't I go to, So yeah, I say write about that for sure. It'll help kind of fill in like what you were doing. Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, I don't see any other questions in the chat. Like I said, I put my email in the chat. So if you have any further questions or anything, please feel free to let me know. Yeah, you're very welcome. All right, have a good